Thank you for joining XRO, India's first AR VR MR podcast. And today I'm really happy to have with me Mr. Anuj Aggarwal, who's the head of partnerships for Omniverse at NVIDIA. Anuj, happy to have you on the show. So would you start with a little bit about your background role at NVIDIA?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thank you for having me on the show, Eddie. Really impressed by the great work you're doing in India. And I'm really excited that you enabled me the opportunity to be a part of this experience. So thank you so much for that opportunity. So my name is Anuj Aggarwal. I've been at NVIDIA about 6 years, and I manage our ecosystem partners for Omniverse. It's a new platform technology being offered by NVIDIA, and it brings together all of our partners and customers around the world to enable to do great things. So we're really excited about what we have announced with Omniverse recently. I'm glad to share some of that with you today. And yeah, I get the awesome opportunity of getting to work with partners across the globe, across every industry.
We are getting into the spatial web, right? So everybody is kind of like trying to build the frameworks of the multiverse, be it your Facebook, Google, Snap, Niantic. Everybody is working on building the spatial web because we will break away from a 2D platform which we've been restricted for over hundreds of years, and get into the 3D world where we'll touch, feel things exactly like how we experience a physical world, and those physical worlds will be digitized, will have a code and give us information which will help us. So can you kind of like in your own words describe what the spatial web is or what Omniverse is?
At the core of what we're doing with Omniverse is that we're providing this platform to simulate the reality of the world, right? We think of things in this terms of what we call the metaverse, right? We've been talking about metaverse. A lot of people have talked about this term and this ideology of the metaverse. And if you take the metaverse and you kind of describe that in a way that people understand it, the simple way to think about it is that everything that we do, that we interact with, that we engage with, that we use, that we build today in the physical world, we can simulate in a completely virtual world. You talked about the idea that you could touch something. How do we feel that, right? You feel something in this metaverse, in this virtual world, this spatial idea of spatial understanding, spatial computing. The reality is that this idea of simulation, if you think of all the people in the world that play games, and now we're seeing these younger generations, Eddie, my teenage kids, 16 years old, kids that are all the way from 2 years old, before they can even speak, the first thing they learn is how to swipe left, swipe right. And they learn how to use their fingers, right, to enlarge or shrink. We're all engaging with this content, but the content traditionally is in this 2D format, right? The future of what these muscles are being built to, these mental muscles and physical muscles, is how do we engage with this virtual world? And my belief I think that a lot of people believe that our future is mostly going to happen in the virtual world. I would almost go far enough to say that the amount of money that we transact and spend is going to be more in the virtual world than we do in the physical world in the future. And I actually believe that to be core. Okay. And so what's happening is, if you look at people coming out of technology, and if you look at people even coming out of college or high school, talk to me just for a moment. Like, everyone is they're playing video games. They're used to this high fidelity experience in this immersive world, where when you throw a rock at the wall, the rock bounces off the wall just as it would in the real world. When you drive a car in the virtual world and it explodes and hits a wall, the explosion is no different than what you would experience in the physical world. These simulations that are happening in this immersive world, we need to figure out a way so that the tools and technologies that we're building today, to build a building, to build a landscape, to build a ship, or to build a car, that the tools that we build, the experiences of how people engage with that technology will be the way that they engage with games today. What I'm making here is a comparison between the experience of what the young minds, and even some of us at our ages, the way we engage with technology today is really through gaming. And the way that we're used to that immersive experience inside that world, that's going to translate itself to the way that we engage with technology in the future, right? where
Right.
you built, the other day I was working with my dad and I was trying to landscape his yard. Okay. He's got a couple 100 square foot backyard. And what do? We traditionally grab a piece of paper, we start scribbling on that piece of paper. Let's draw a box. Let's measure out from the fence how far it is to the house. We want to have a pergola over here. And you kind of draw this 2D sketch of what you would like to have happen. Imagine that it's as simple as you're in this virtual world with your dad, and your dad's somewhere on the other end of the planet. Maybe he's in India and I'm here. Luckily, my dad's 10 minutes away. I can drive over there and I can verbally show him some photos of other backyards and say, imagine if this pergola, this stand, we put this in this corner, what would that look like? But he's 80 years old. He's like, I don't know what that's going to look like, right? How do I understand what is this pergola going to look like? How do I know what colors I should choose? But imagine together, we could be in a virtual space anywhere in the world. He could be in his corner, I could be in mine. I didn't have to get in my car. I didn't have to worry in the pandemic of driving out and maybe carrying something to his house and getting him infected. I could just show up in this virtual space together. He feels comfortable in this virtual space. Everything feels like it does in his house. It just feels real to him. And he can have a little hand stick or hand motions or use his fingers. And I could drop a pergola and we could look and say, oh my God, with real lighting, right? He could walk over to the pergola and smell the wood, right? Oh, what if we use pine wood? What if we use redwood? What if we use a different type of wood? What would that effect be on the sensory nerves of our system? Right? And I could say, Dad, we could have trees over here. Imagine what that tree, you could simulate the tree 5, 10, 15 years from today. What would that look like in this yard? Well, how much shade will you get from the sun that your house faces east? What happens at 2 p.m. when that sun comes up? So what we're talking about here is not technology for the sake of technology. We're talking about changing the way we engage with the things that we do on a daily basis, right? And so what Omniverse is building is a platform for simulation to enable that spatial real world feeling across every industry, right? You could imagine if you're going to build an oil and gas plant, for example, right? At GTC, with an event that just passed a couple of weeks ago, we made an announcement with a company called Bentley, amazing Bentley Systems. And these guys build technology for infrastructure, right? And they're building the 4D, as they call it, the 4D digital twin, where every single thing can be simulated, right? You can simulate water flow. You can simulate the oil flow through a gas line pipe. You can simulate an entire oil and gas plant. If there's an issue on the plant, you don't need to have a trained engineer show up to fix the issue. You could be in a control room wearing a 3D display, like a VR or AR or XR display device, and you could guide somebody. Here's the issue. We know that because we have an IoT sensor inside the gas line. We know that there's a slowdown here in the gas flow. We want you to go there and we'll walk you through the process of how to repair it. Somebody walks over there with a display on their head. They walk over there and somebody's coaching them in real time how to address the issue inside that pipe, right? So do you need to have the same level of training? I would argue you don't, because you can train somebody and hand walk them through exactly what to do with the technology that we're enabling today.
Right. Wow. So interesting. This sounds like, almost science fiction-y, I mean, but it's all becoming a reality. I mean, you mentioned about how we interact with technology is changing. I have a 6-year-old boy. Back then when we were young, we had these big bulky TVs and we had to actually get up and touch the TV. Then came remotes, and then we have Alexa. So he keeps on talking to Alexa, he doesn't. So technology obviously is changing. It's doing some really magical thing. Just recently, that there's this non-fungible token I heard on how this Beeple, who's an artist, sold his digital art, which was auctioned Christie's for $69 million. And you mentioned something very cool, that the virtual world eventually will have more money over there. Now it's very difficult to kind of digest, So could you kind of break it down with use cases? Where do you think, if I'm an enterprise, how it's going to help me, and where is the economical value over there?
Yeah, so I think, we can all agree that AI is going to change the future. It already is, right? Think of all the examples that we see where AI is impacting our life. You mentioned your son interacting with Alexa, right? Natural language processing happening at the back end in the cloud. That's already changing our life, right? We call into customer service. You no longer talk to a human being. When you go and chat with a service representative, 90% of your requests is being handled by an AI bot in the back end. Somebody has to train that bot. Somebody has to train that responder to answer your question. Understand what is the customer sentiment? Are they angry? Are they sad? Are they emotional? Understand the sentiment, understand what they're asking. There's a lot of things going on. And then how do I respond to that? How do I respond to it in a way where I can help the customer feel like they got the customer service level that would have been provided by a human being, right? As humans, we have this ability, this keen understanding of when somebody asks us something, we have the ability to understand what are they asking? Why are they asking it? What is their emotion at the moment that they ask it? Well, not everybody is that great, but generally we expect that level of customer service, right? And so how do you train an AI to be able to enable that type of customer service experience so we can scale, right? We want to be able to scale our businesses. We want to be able to income more people into our business, right? Another example is, imagine with AI, there's companies that are building tractors and farm machines that go and can hand kill a single weed by dropping a single piece of poison on that weed and kill it, versus just mass spraying using an airplane, aerosol over all the plants and vegetables and weeds and trying to kill just the weeds. Well, that's affecting the type of quality of produce that we create, right? In my last, I call it 10 years of life, I've become allergic to fruits and vegetables that I never had an allergy to, right? All of a sudden I eat a cherry or a plum and I'm starting to get itchiness in my throat. I eat an almond. What's happening to them as we scale the number of people on the planet? We have to scale how we produce and how we support the people on the planet, right? And so what we try to do is throw technology at it. And rather than trying to address the individual weed, we're trying to use technology and blanket cover all of it, right? Because that's the easiest thing to do. But using technologies like AI, we can infer and understand and learn what is the actual weed. What if we could send a tractor with a camera on it, mounted at the top of the tractor, and as it's going down, it isolates a plant and says that plant there is a weed. It's a destructible plant to our garden. And you can put a robotic hand that pulls it out of the soil and gets rid of it, or deliver just the right product to kill that weed in its place and make sure it doesn't show up again, but yet not affect all of the fruits and vegetables that we need to eat on a daily basis. This idea is proliferating itself across every industry, right? But we think about, if you take architecture, engineering, construction, I gave you the example of my dad, but think of large deployments, right? Imagine you're going to put a building full of glass panels in the center of Las Vegas. Imagine how much sun that they get over there. If you could simulate every single ray of sun at a certain part of the time of the day, you could imagine that before you even designed that building, you could avoid costly mistakes because you could simulate everything before you built it and know that the sun rays might bounce off that glass and direct themselves to a person in the street or a car and burn a hole through them, right? So how do you simulate something before you build it so you can avoid all the costly mistakes? Not only mistakes of having to redo something over again, but think of all the material that goes to waste, right? Think of the fact that once you build something, if you realize a mistake, you have to dig out and break that concrete, you have to throw away the material, and you have to take human labor time to go and solve that problem again. And so what does that mean? It makes it so that now you have less ability to go and put up another building because you had to go and repair the one that you were still building. In San Francisco, we have a building called the Millennium Building. I don't know if you've heard of this, but the Millennium Building was built a few years ago, $1 million units, for 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom units in San Francisco. And these guys built this on an area in San Francisco where the building, and it's huge building, started to sink because the foundation upon which they built it, they obviously didn't do the right amount of research to figure out what is the foundation we're building on, how far down do we need to drive these pillars to support the weight of this building, what are the weather conditions that are going to affect it, what are the conditions of the soil as we get down below a certain amount of feet. So my point here is we need to, one example of all the things that we're doing is just trying to understand before we make a decision on something, the better we can simulate the outcome of the decision we're going to make, the better we can make sure that we arrive at a conclusion where the end result does not require redesign, reimplementation, rebuild, so we don't waste time, energy, and effort, right? We don't have to throw away useful things like materials. The other thing that's becoming, really interesting, I talked a little bit about AI, is that artificial intelligence needs a way to learn, right? Think of a car. You have a car that's going to drive around on the street, right? So take Tesla, for example. The majority of their learning that they're putting into these self-driving cars is everyone who owns a Tesla. Everyone who owns a Tesla, right, in the world is a guinea pig for Tesla's learning, right? All the data is going back up to the cloud, and Tesla's learning, how did this person drive? What were the driving conditions? What was the road conditions? What were the lighting conditions? They're taking all that sensory data into the sensors, and they're saying, okay, how do we adjust the compute and AI of the car so that as we continue to push the advancements in self-driving cars, we can take the learning from all of our cars on the road, and we can provide a better driving experience. Well, imagine that for at any given point in the world, there's only a certain number of people that are ever driving their Tesla. Now with the pandemic, people are driving less and less, so that means less data. But imagine you have a compute platform in the cloud or on-prem, like in your data center, and you have simulations running real time where you have cars driving in this virtual world that feels, looks, and acts like the digital, like the physical world. And you can not only train one car, but you can train millions and billions of cars, and each of those cars or series of cars could be trained under different conditions. You could simulate different lighting conditions, different weather conditions, rain, snow, sleet, different animals running across the street. You can simulate people, right? Because you can simulate human motion characters running around through this virtual world that you've built. And each car or each set of cars can be running 24 hours a day. Imagine the amount of learning that you can pull from that. The more realistic that world is, the more you can ensure that when I take that simulation and I deploy that AI that I've taught in this world to the physical world, it's going to know about everything, right? Because you have tons and tons of data that you've created that now you can feed into the AI, and the AI can become more confident about driving you and your family across any country in the world, because it's been trained across all this data that we didn't even know existed, because we're simulating it all in real time. And a lot of the things that we're doing with AI is to figure out how can we not only simulate this virtual world, and with graphics technology, how can we create this realistic world, but we're using technologies like PhysX, where we take simulation and we can, take a pair of scissors, for example, and when I drop it here into my desktop, you heard that bounce, you hear the sound, the scissors bounce off the desk at a certain height. Well, with PhysX, we can now start to provide that level of reality in terms of how objects collide, how they interact, how do human arms move, how do hands move, how do the eyeballs twitch and move. We can take things like audio to face, where we can simulate the structure of the face and the muscles in our face, and we can now deploy natural language to the human in a digital world. So when this person is talking, it looks like the real human is talking, right? So imagine the impact of that training in AI for understanding emotion, right? If we can understand human emotion better, and we can train AIs to understand human emotion better, imagine the type of therapy we can deploy to people who don't have, access to therapists. I would argue that having this virtual platform, this virtual world that's so realistic, and being able to train and develop the AI in that in such a way that you can deploy it in all these different use cases and make it valuable to all these different types of human beings and to these things that we want to do, like self-driving cars, to ensure safety of the streets and the people on them, I think is something that's, mind-blowing for me. And on a daily basis, I get up, I work sometimes, 12, 13, 14 hours a day. My wife and family have accepted it because I'm constantly telling them about the things that I'm impacting with the work that I'm doing, right? And the partnerships I get to deal with are incredible. I mean, another company I dealt with at GTC, a partner that we brought into the platform, is called Real Illusion. They're out of Taiwan. These guys build virtual characters for things like gaming and for movies. But I said to them and the team, we talked to them about all the impacts of having these realistic humans. If you saw the BMW demo that we did about the virtual factory at GTC, we had these humans that were running around in the factory, and we were simulating how those humans were interacting with design changes in the line. How were those humans interact with the autonomous robots moving through the factory, right? And in order to do that, you need to have a realistic human, right? And by the way, we're living in this world right now where we want to encourage our young humans, our young children, to think more diverse. I have a daughter, I have a son, right? I want my daughter to know that she has as good or a better opportunity in the world than my son does, right? That
Right.
she should have no restrictions on who she becomes. And it doesn't matter the color of her skin, if she's a dark-skinned Indian or she's a light-skinned person. It doesn't matter of the size of her, her eyeballs or the size of her hands or the fact that she may look different or whatever. It doesn't matter. But so when we can create the digital humans inside this factory, we can create this diversity so that the AI learns from the ground up that the world is not a single color or a single look or a single feel. It's a diverse. I need to get used, if the technology needs to know from the get-go that the world must be diverse. They have to start at that ground construct. And with AI and simulation, we have the ability to impact that with tools and technologies like that.
You gave me some really, really cool stuff, right from your architecture, engineering, construction example to autonomous vehicle being trained in virtual simulations. And in the virtual simulations, you guys are simulating the physics of things, even rain falling and stuff like that. How cool is that? I guess in another few years, the entire world is going to get transformed because everything that's physical will be digitized, and that physical object will give us information of which we can build better business and products. Inclusivity and diversity is so very important. I guess, most of the artificial intelligence which is being built right now is coded with the biases. Now, technology is a double-edged sword. It's got loaded with these positive things. It can create transformation. You look at each and every technology, be it artificial intelligence, IoT, synthetic biology, AR, VR, MR. It's got loaded with positivities and the transformation it can create for the world, for businesses and consumers. But then there's this darker side of it, which is, if it goes to the fringe element, it can create some huge disruption. So that is another conversation that we need to really need to have, because besides the positives of the spatial web or the spatial computing that we're getting into, the whole deal is that it is going to be underpinned by surveillance tech, because as soon as we have a glasses which can capture everything what the end user is looking at, you're getting into a world where everything is captured. And that's what spatial computing is. Now, do you think that there is a way where we can build the spatial web or the multiverse, the digital twin that we're talking about, which is going to be super beneficial for us and businesses? Can that be built in a way that a privacy is secured, which is interoperable, unlike the World Wide Web right now, which has walled gardens? What are your views on something like that?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked this question. We're starting at the base layer there. In order for us to have a 3D world where we all engage, it's not going to be done by any one person or any one company. We need everybody in the mix, right? In order to do that, we need a common language to start with, right? And one of the things that the team at NVIDIA understood early on is that in order to build this 3D multiverse or metaverse that we're talking about, we need a common language at the core of it that allowed all the tools, technologies, services, visual services to interact with. And so what we arrived on is we arrived on this idea or this data interchange format called USD. And USD stands for Universal Scene Description. It is a open source format that was designed by Pixar, right? The guys who make movies like Toy Story. Imagine if you think of some of the largest virtual worlds ever built, Pixar's at the core of that, right? These guys build massive virtual worlds and movie scenes that we get immersed in. I mean, I've been watching Pixar movies, Toy Story, Cars 2, since my kids were little, right? Every single Toy Story that came out, every single movie that came out, my kids were like, Daddy, opening day, let's go watch that movie, right? And we would get immersed together in this world. And then we would come out and do what? We would buy toys and clothing and things from the physical world so we could feel more immersed in that world, right? But it starts with one common definition. How do we all understand this world? So USD is the platform technology, the baseline of how everybody's tools, the technologies, the different AI bots, the visualization capabilities all plug in to this 3D world of the World Wide Web. We needed a way like the web, to be able to, like you have Apache in the web, we needed a way to connect all the tools, speaking in the same language, one central nucleus, if you will, to connect all the tools, all the users, all of the different AIs, microservices, and technologies into this metaverse. And what Omniverse brings to the world is that we took USD and we said, let's figure out a way to help people using USD collaborate. And what does that mean? It means that when you ask a question, Eddie, that question goes into WebEx or Zoom or Teams or what have you, and you say something. If there's 100 people on this call, you say, hey, Anuj, I'm doing this thing. I have a question to you about how do I do XYZ better? And what happens? I hear, my human ear hears that Eddie asked Anuj a question. And the same thing, when you think about everyone's doing all this work, how do we collaborate with that work and to create this metaverse where we're all speaking the same language, like we are on this call? When you make that request, when you make a change in the digital world, the other people connected to that digital world in order to collaborate need to know about the change. If you have a question and you populate that in the digital world, somebody who has the expertise needs to be able to address that. If you're in the virtual world and you need an oil change for your car, somebody needs to participate and deliver that oil change. So when you make that broadcast, what the Omniverse nucleus is doing is saying, hey, there was a change made or request made, who can address that? And it then broadcasts that change or that request to the services and apps and people that might be able to address it. And somebody can come into that virtual world and make the change, right? But we agree that as we have this world, whether they're small, where you have a work group of 5 to 10 people, or they're large, you start to get into a couple hundred people, or they're global, where you may have couples of millions of people engaging, you need a way to be able to protect certain types of data. And the great thing about USD, and this is something that we really believe that the industry at large is starting to get a hold of, is that it is such a very powerful way of describing information and data that we believe both 2D and 3D data can be explored by USD. The great thing is that it has this idea of layers, okay, where you can now work in a layer of data, and you can either decide to expose or not expose that layer of data to others. So imagine, for example, you're a company and you're building a digital twin for that company. Let's say that a large company where they need a digital twin of all the different pieces in their factory. And maybe you build the turbines, or you build, the piping that they need in their digital factory. But there's certain confidential things in your turbine blade and the types of metals that you use, or maybe there's some specific technology and patented technology in the way that you design the motor and the cooling infrastructure for the engine. And you don't want that data to be part of the digital factory. But all that data is contained in the CAD file that you're going to provide to them to build a digital factory. With USD, you can provide them only what you want them to see of that CAD file into that world, right? All your origination data stays the same. It's not manipulated. It's not been changed. You haven't provided it, but you provided a visual context and capability of the blade, but not all the confidential data you want that factory to be aware of. So as you think of building this large 3D metaverse where everybody's engaged, we're all going to have certain things in that world that we don't want the world to know about. Or just like in our physical world, there's this ideology in psychiatry. When I did my degree in college early on, and I did a bachelor's in science for engineering, and I ended up doing a minor in psychiatry, right? Just to understand, what does the human mind work? There's these 4 individual buckets, right? There's what, as an individual, there's what I know about myself, and I choose to share with you, Eddie. There's what I know about myself, and I choose not to share with you, Eddie. And then there's I don't know about myself, but you know about me, and so there's certain things you and I agree that you know about me at this point that I don't know about myself, right? And then there's the 4th bucket, which is what I don't know about myself and the people around me don't know about me. So in those 4 basic rules, if you think about every human relationship you have, those 4 rules are consistent. And those same 4 rules need to be applied in the metaverse. And so having a construct that not only gives you the ability to interchange with one another, but also gives you ways of how do you provide only the data that you want other people to be subscribed to? How do you provide that? I think that USD is the cornerstone for that. And what we've done is we've built a layer on top of it that allows you to engage with that in the way that we want to process that data and information.
Do you think it's a possibility of weaving or stitching the entire digitized version of the entire globe? And what would be an impact if someday we are able to construct a digital twin of the entire globe?
We're already getting there, Eddie. I mean, look at all the data, geospatial data we have, right? There's amazing companies out there like Cesium. It's a new startup. I just talked to the CEO the other day. They're doing amazing work building 3D tile data. There's companies like blackshark.ai that are used for creating these video games for like Microsoft Flight Simulator. There's games, there's companies like Maxar that have satellites in the sky that are providing geospatial data for the entire globe. The data and information is there, right? What hasn't been there is the compute architecture to be able on a global scale to take the entire globe and put it into a visual display with the highest level of fidelity, and so that you can simulate things and then train the AIs. And we're getting there. What Omniverse is built is the technology, not only on the collaboration of how do you connect the data, but then what do you do with that data once you've connected it? So we've built an architecture for building microservices for things like AI, for simulation, for graphics. And we've also built a state-of-the-art rendering technology that has never been seen by the Earth or the planet before. It allows for very large worlds to be consumed visually in this renderer at high fidelity. So if you think about renders on today that we have offline rendering technology that companies that have built technology that are rendered for rendering movies. But imagine each frame may take hours or minutes or days or weeks to render a frame because of all the computation of lighting that's in the scene. You have game engine renderers that don't have the same level of fidelity, but are really designed to work on any device, right? They want to work on a phone all the way up to a high-end compute device. But they're not really taking advantage of the compute scale that technology companies like NVIDIA are building, right? Where we are building these high-end GPUs, where you can simulate an entire virtual world. But imagine stitching together those technology GPUs in a cloud or a data center, right? If you look at the acquisition NVIDIA made with Mellanox, now we have low latency, high bandwidth interconnectivity that we can stitch together many thousands of GPUs, not only in a single node, but across many nodes. How do you build a renderer that takes advantage of all that compute, right? NVIDIA owns the 5th largest supercomputer industrially in the world today. How do we take all that compute and how do we apply it to simulating this global world so that we can run things like weather simulation? We can understand that the next pandemic that happens, which by the way, Eddie, unfortunately, I don't want to depress you, but I've already told my kids that in their lifetime, this will happen again. And there's a high likelihood it's going to happen in my lifetime, right? So how do we take the understanding that we have of the globe, the weather, the wind that's blowing? What is the impact of that on a disease that's airborne? How can we simulate the number of people that would hit, the people that we most highly affected? How do we use that data and information to make sure that we vaccinate the people that are highest risk versus just saying that a certain age group is high risk? If my parents are 85 years old, but I deliver all their groceries and they never leave their house, are they truly at as high a risk as the people living in a small village in India, or the people that are living in Bombay in these poor little areas, right, where they're completely exposed to wind and other factors, right? If we could simulate that, once we understand that this next pandemic is delivered through a raindrop, maybe the answer is not a vaccine, but we just need to give people proper rain jackets. I mean, that's simplifying the issue, but you get my point, right? So having a global representation of the world, we can now run simulations in real time to understand the impact of something that's going to affect our world, whether it be weather, whether it be the next self-driving car or self-driving helicopter, whatever it's going to be. How do we deliver packages for last mile delivery by Amazon? What are the impacts on the bird community and all that? We can simulate it because everything is real. And we're trying to build that world, and we need companies and individuals, developers. I think India is a great, massive market of just a massive brain, if I think about it, right? The level of intelligence, the level of schooling and education, and the importance of that, no matter what your financial situation is in India, it's the number one thing is your education, your learning. So we have a massive amount of human compute, mental compute in India, right? What I think is missing is, to break the walls and have people be more creative in their thinking. Rather than working on something because somebody told you to do it, think about what are the walls I need to break through to develop the future. And being a part of the future means that you develop that starting today. It doesn't mean that you go and develop what people are telling you to develop. It means to build the future based on what you want the future to be. And I think that power can be unleashed in India. And I think that this may sound a bit, overconfident, but I think Omniverse is going to enable creativity for the future of India to really blow that up. So I'm really excited about that.
You rightfully pointed out that in India the education, at least the parents over here, they traditionally nudge their kids to a direction where they feel the kids should go, which not exactly most of the times because the kids get frustrated because they're pushed into a direction which they really don't want to go. But I think the world is going into such an exciting space, and if we leverage the opportunity that the internet presents and we break away from the shackles and go beyond, there is so much we can do, because I think India, like you rightfully pointed out, there is so much knowledge over here, but it's just trapped. It's
yes.
Yeah, it needs to open up, its creativity shackles and just break out. And there's so much that we can do. I'm really excited about the spatial web, because it can open up collaborations in ways which we can't fathom. You could be sitting anywhere around the world and you could create collaborations which could be so awesome. And then you said something which was really cool: weather simulation, pandemic simulation. What would that mean to a world? How we could mitigate all those humongous problems, which a climate crisis could solve, so it's super fantastic. So talking about India, how important is the India market for NVIDIA and Omniverse? And are you talking to some people over here in India?
India is a highly exciting market for NVIDIA and for me personally, but for the company and what we're doing. You already said it. I think that there's a tremendous amount of work to make the metaverse. We're essentially recreating the earth, right? And so we need people who are willing to explode their mind process, to really open up their mind and think about what they want the world to be, and to simulate that in this virtual world. If you can take your creativity and you can build that inside of the Omniverse, and with the visual fidelity, you can share that out with the world. We just launched a new thing. It's what we call our launcher for Omniverse, called Machinima. It's the ability to bring in your characters into this virtual world and your voice, and share that with others. Share your minds, share your thoughts, share your creativity, share what you want, your vision, what you want the world to be, and use that platform. Use platforms like YouTube, use platforms like TikTok, whatever you use for getting your voice out in the world. In order to have change, in order to break through the constructs that have been put around us, the walls that have been put around us, you need to take advantage of these tools and technologies. I think India, it's one of the most untapped resources. And in my mind, to some extent, I feel hurt being an Indian and sad being an Indian, because I realized that my family moved me here 47 years ago, and they took the best of what they felt America had to offer. They took the best of the Indian culture and took Holi, and we made Holi part of who I am. But at the same time, we took advantage of the idea that your mind should be free. Go and expose yourself to what's available and decide what's right for you in your journey. You don't have to be a genius, but you are a genius inherently. So go and figure out what you want to do and be passionate about it, and go do that. Don't allow anybody to get in your path. What I think that Omniverse and tools like the technologies that enable India to do is to be free, to be creative. There's a great movie that I loved. I really enjoyed. It was a movie with Amir Khan. He started using YouTube and singing, and people
exactly
loved it.
Right.
And then what happened is that when her father found out, he flipped out. But the mother said, "You know what? We're going to support you because it's such a beautiful thing." And that creativity has to be unlocked. And you can do it in your room with technologies like Omniverse. You can start to show your creativity. There was a great thing we did. We did this marbles contest with Omniverse, where we gave creators around the world the ability to win some technology. I think it was a GPU or something, and come into this world and create using the marbles assets that we had shown last year at SIGGRAPH. And people did some of the most amazing work. but it's a way for people to unlock. And some of the things I saw just touched me in such a unique, humane way. They touch you in the core of your heart, where you walk away feeling like, oh my God, I didn't realize this type of creativity existed in the world, right? And so India has that. It's an amazing market, right? So what I feel that India, one of the weaknesses I feel about India is that we, as Indians, we are taught to live, drink, and feel a certain way every day of our life so we can achieve financial success, because everything routes to, financial and who you are, what is your role. I was at a party the other day and somebody introduced me to somebody else and they said, oh, this is Anuj Aggarwal and his role at NVIDIA is this. I said, hold on a second. That's not how I want to be introduced, right? I am a human being. I want to be introduced by the things that I love and care about. I love my job at NVIDIA. I would never trade it for anything, but that's not who I am. So let me introduce myself in the way I want to be introduced. But thank you very much, right? I want India to introduce themselves, introduce the amazing creativity and match that, and not let India be just a place where the most amazing brains are, but let India be a place where the most amazing creativity is, and let that break through. So what I would love to see from India, I think it's an explosive market. I think it's a huge opportunity. And what I'd like to see is people being free to expose their creativity, marry that with the amazing brain power they have there, and just turn out some amazing, beautiful ways of making a better world. That's what I'd love to see.
Lovely. Anuj, it was awesome talking to you. I feel you because, there is, you have got such a nice blend going on, which I don't know whether, I'm sure you know about it. You have blended into this physical world or universe of us in a very beautiful way. And I love the thought that it's your introduction when you said that it's if we break away the shackles from a materialistic world and understand who we are, why we are over here, and what's a purpose. And if we all find that, I think we all will be able to create that world that we just dream of, aspire of, but never make an effort to do anything, for. So I know that you're running short on time. Is there anything that you would like to add or show to my audience?
There's I have 100 slides here I could take you through, right? And I could take you through content and talk your ear off for the next 5 hours. I'm so excited and passionate about what we're doing here. I didn't want to make this focus particularly on a particular type of technology because the problem is at large. It's a much bigger problem, and we need every company, every human being involved in making this truly this metaverse, this global, this global worldwide simulation that you talked about. We have the compute there. NVIDIA is building the compute infrastructure in the cloud and on-prem to support it. We're building the technology simulation stack on top of that. And now we need everybody on board to come and bring the content, bring the data, bring the applications and the simulation and the AIs and reality to that world to make it what we want the world to be, right? If we simulate it in there, we can make it true in the physical world. And that's what I'd ask from you and your listeners. And I'm glad to bring just all kinds of great people to the next talk show. Eddie, I think you're doing an amazing service. I think I love your energy, your happiness. I love your soul. I think you're doing great shit for India with what you're doing. I hope that 2 billion people understand what you're doing in India and start to watch your podcast and become religious followers of it. I think you're doing a great thing, dude. And I'm a big follower of yours myself. I'm going to start watching your podcast on whenever they release. So I'll be one of your new watchers.
Thanks a lot.
With all my family.
Thanks a lot. I really, really appreciate this. I really appreciate you sharing your insights. And I think you're doing a great job. And I'm really excited about what the Omniverse is going to do for the entire world. Wish you the very best. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, please press the subscribe button. And until next time, see you guys. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Cheers, brother. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.